Joining me now is Robert Jacobson, and we're happy to have Robert Jacobson on. He's got a new book that's just out, which is pretty neat, that I haven't had a chance to read, but I got a title, Founder and Partner Space Advisors. That is his title, and he's got a new book out on space exploration. Robert Jacobson, great to have you with us.
Hello, John. I'm excited to be here this morning. Thank you very much for having me today.
We've had several times in the past 2 weeks, we've had the Deputy Administrator of NASA come on and talk about the space station that's going to be at the moon, talk about the successful launch off the helicopter and the rover to Mars, talking about putting a man on Mars in the not-too-distant future. The president has invested time and energy in rebuilding NASA, space exploration. Why does it matter, Robert?
We have to go back in history just a little bit. Think about, back in the 12th or 13th century, we had the Ming Dynasty sent ships out into the Pacific. Now, it was thought that maybe they landed in North America, and we found out that that was actually not the case. Or we had Lewis and Clark going out into the Northwest, and other pioneers here in North America. Could you imagine had we or any civilization not taken those steps as explorers, and what the benefits we would not be reaping today? It's a bit like that what's going on in space. And there's the exploratory side, which is mostly funded by government. And there's this new energy going on in the private sector. And so many things that I think, I was just listening to a little bit of your previous guest about essentially liberty, individual rights. This extends into space, and it is just an incredible time. You might know, most people know Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Elon Musk of SpaceX. They are heavily invested in space. But look, they didn't invest in space to make money. They intended to make money in other areas to invest in space. And we are all going to be the beneficiaries and better because of that. I mean, who could have imagined back in the 90s when the internet was coming along? Email was kind of easy to predict, but could you have imagined Uber, Spotify, FaceTime, the myriad of applications that came from the infrastructure that was built onto the internet? So space is no longer just a destination, but it's going to be an enabler for fantastic new wealth. And the United States really needs to stay both a leader in terms of things doing, NASA, both the civilian and with the defense side with the new U.S. Space Force, but also these commercial activities, which are going to be unpredictable in terms of the innovations that they will be creating and that we're already receiving from space.
So the benefits to the U.S., I mean, when we had the Deputy Administrator of NASA on, look, the benefits are there. He said there's economic benefits, there's of space exploration, there's defense benefits going into the future, as we remember from the Reagan days, talking about the space shield. He also said, the exploration of going to Mars and trying to find, is there life there? Was there life there? Is there water? They think there's water 100 kilometers under the surface. And then, of course, the partnership with Elon Musk, SpaceX. But I wanted to have you on today, Robert, because average people are saying to myself, okay, wait a minute, I don't have a job. I'm trying to get unemployment benefits. I'm 2 months behind on my rent. My child can't go to school, can't get an education because the media stoked this fear. So now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with my child. What the hell do I care about Mars? Isn't that a legitimate question during the time we're in right now?
It's absolutely a legitimate question, and I feel sympathetic for everyone who is struggling and feeling a lot of pain into the whether there's economic or health or otherwise. I really do feel that space, the investment in space. Let's just take Mars for example. We've got the Perseverance, which is this cool project you related to, and it's not just a cool project that it's actually money that's all spent mostly here in the United States. Now, there are some other partners that are outside the United States when they do these large collaborative projects going to interplanetary mission. Essentially, it's a 2-year mission. But the money that is spent on space goes here on Earth. There's not an ATM in space. There's not a bank in space. So when when Congress decides to greenlight a mission, that money is spent here with contractors who send their kids to the same schools, who employ people, who have other contractors that they're working with. So there's actually a whole trickle down effect regarding space, and there's been it's a tricky thing to actually pinpoint, but the return is not just on the investment into the hardware or say the scientists and engineers that are making this happen, but there's there's plenty of intangible. And the more we learn, let's just go back to Mars.
Right.
The more we learn about Mars, we learn so much more about ourselves, and we get all these sometimes unpredictable benefits. For example, I just learned last night, I did not know this, but on the International Space Station, you got to keep the astronauts alive. And so having, clean air, clean water is pretty important. There is a system that is in place that was developed for the ISS that is now being used for filtration of office spaces and other places where you're bringing groups of people to keep them healthy, to keep bacteria and germs. So the investment in space has all sorts of spin-offs. I would invite listeners to go to go to your favorite search engine and look up NASA spin-off. And it's actually a publication that it used to be up in print, but I think it's now mostly digital, where they basically highlight quarterly or every year all the different spin-offs that are just coming from that investment in the public side of space, being NASA.
When you say the public side of space, and by the way, we're with Robert Jacobson. He's got a new book out. He's also the founder and partner of Space Advisors. His new book, Space is Open for Business. Let's get back, because you said there's benefits, but you didn't really name them. So again, I don't mean to belabor this, Robert, but I'm back to trying to pay my rent, and we're going to Mars. What benefit is there for me? I mean, I asked NASA the same question. I got kind of the long, visionary answer, but you're in the middle of a pandemic, so I just want to get more specific. I don't have a job. I can't pay my rent. My kid's not in school. What does going to Mars going to do for me in the next 12 months? Give me a specific.
I don't know specifically what going to Mars is going to help someone who is on unemployment in the next 12 months. These missions were planned years ago. They don't happen overnight, and there's no doubt the inspirational part. But if we go back to what NASA currently has going with the International Space Station, which is now the U.S. portion of it is designated an American laboratory. They're doing advanced work right now. They're working on a vaccine for salmonella, which is still a global problem. And excuse me, I have a kitten and a mother cat in the background that are causing a little bit of a noise.
That's fine.
They're a little rambunctious. They're excited too
it.
This morning.
Right.
And we have there's all sorts of great there's research happening right now that is making regenerative organs so that you're going to be able to use essentially one's own cells, not even using stem cells. They're actually making advances further beyond just stem cells to help people that might need organ replacement. So that's an area of regenerative medicine. They have created through research on the space station, a new form of delivering drugs for cancer. They basically use a balloon to administer the drugs. So there are real benefits coming to people. I can't tell someone who is unemployed today that, you can just, that SpaceX is, or as an example, can immediately hire you because, you're unemployed. But if you have, if you just slightly spend a little bit of time tracking what is going on just even this lower Earth orbit activity, this is where the space station is. There are benefits already coming to us every day. I mean, we benefit from our investments in GPS that allows us to use mapping systems. And every day that we use one of our smartphones and we're using some type of map, if we're dependent on getting our food to the grocery stores from, through that whole logistics supply chain, it is heavily based on using space infrastructure, using satellites. If we need weather forecasting, we're in hurricane season on the Atlantic coast. A lot of that important data is from space assets. robotic, just like a Mars mission, difference, but still leveraging the space domain.
All right, so basically, the other issue we've got, and we're with Robert Jacobson. He's a founder of Space Advisors. He's the author of a new book, Space is Open for Business. The other thing we have to be concerned about, because I get everything that you're saying, and it is inspirational, and it is the right thing to do, and President Trump has made investments in space that we've not seen really the percentage scale since John F. Kennedy in the early 1960s. But the other issue here is competition, right? I mean, the United Arab Emirates just sent up a rocket to the moon. They've got a satellite space station, right? You got other countries, China, et cetera, trying to dominate the space area. And so, remember, I'm older than you, Robert, so you don't remember this, but back when I was growing up in the 60s, dates me, there was a big deal. It was a race to the moon. Who was going to get there first? Is it going to be U.S. or the USSR? And I remember when the Soviets sent up Sputnik in like 1958. I mean, Americans freaked out. Like, they were freaked that, how did the USSR do that and not us? Why aren't we there? And what's going to happen if they dominate space and, they colonize the moon? I mean, these were real conversations that were happening, when I was 5 and 7, 8. So does some of that still play in, Robert?
Yes, it does. So I'm going to backtrack to what your first comment. So UAE, which recently sent a rocket, is actually headed to Mars. So Mars is going to actually get kind of crowded, and they're with robots. It's going to get crowded with robots. You've got China has launched a mission, the U.S. and UAE. Now, let's first stick with UAE. It's been very interesting. I've monitoring what's going on. They specifically said, that they see investments in space. They want to do things locally, indigenously, domestically in UAE for space. They also wanted to use it to inspire science within the Arab world and to encourage people to become educated and to study, because there's a lot of problems in the Middle East around a lack of education. So they're definitely doing that there, and it's probably really worth monitoring them. I would not be surprised if they eventually build a spaceport there. China is the one the United States really needs to be concerned with. There's still a lot of, they know they want to be a spacefaring nation. They don't necessarily know what exactly they want to do. But when China makes up their mind, and I've heard this from very high-level sources, it is going to shake the United States to its core. And a couple things could happen. China is wants to go to one of the poles of the moon, and they could essentially say, hey, there's going to be a whole keep out zone. We're just doing science here. It's sort of like what they're doing with the South China Seas, and essentially trying to prevent access and free use of the waterways. And China does everything and thinks of everything in terms of dual use. And what I mean by dual use? Well, dual use being civilian and military. So they actually control their space program it's controlled by the military. And every space startup, that's meaning startup being like a business effort, right, in China, there is a connection to the government there. And if any private effort, if you're a scientist in China, you decide to go start a space company, you can do that in China. But if you get just a little bit of traction, the government takes notice. They can and most likely will take some type of ownership position in it. And another way that China is speaking to their people through culture and media. There's a film that came out, I think it was last year in 2019, called The Wandering Earth. It's now available on Netflix. It got almost no attention outside of China. But one of my contacts who monitors what's going on in China said, you need to see this film. This is in January. The film within 6 weeks made something like $600 to $700 million, and it became like the number one or number two highest grossing film in China. Now, the film is kind of preposterous. The idea is that the sun was going supernova, and that they were going to literally move the Earth out of the solar system to save it. But the Chinese government invested in the film as it was being produced, because the message of the film said that we, China, are going to be a spacefaring nation. We will take generations. We will, this is a long-term effort, multi-generational effort. Here in the United States, we have a problem, getting past one quarter, let alone thinking about things past, 2 terms of a president.
We can't get past thinking about the convention and who Biden's going to pick as his VP and what we're going to do November 3rd and how do I get the kids back to school. So you're right, Robert. I mean, the Chinese, their space program is run by the CCP military. They have a tremendous advantage. They're long-term thinkers. We're not. We can't, based on the environment that we're in right now and the way our governance is. They're at a major advantage. So, look, I get what you're saying. I'm out of time for this segment, but I got to have you back on because there is a business of space, and it's everybody's business because it's your future, right? No question about it. Robert Jacobson, thank you. Great segment. Let's have you back. I am going to read your book that you sent me, Space is Open for Business. You can also go to his website, spaceisopenforbusiness.com, spaceisopenforbusiness.com, and we're going to have him back soon. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for having me today.
You got it, buddy.